I welcome you all back for the second lecture of this morning. Our presenter, speaking on the topic of recreating the musical library of Sri Muthuswami Dikshitar, is Dr. K Srilatha, who received her musical education from Srimati K Bhama of Srirangam and later from Sangeeta Kalanidhi Sri R. K. Srikantan and more recently from Vidban Sri A. Sadasivam and Dr. Shakuntala Narasimhan. She received her MA degree from Sri Padmavati Women's University, Tirupati, got her PhD degree for the thesis entitled Study of Musical Notations of Prabandhas from Thanjavur Manuscripts from the Jain University, Bengaluru. Currently, she teaches at the Bangalore University and is also writing a book on the songs of early modern South India. We've had the pleasure of Dr. Srilatha present in the last year's lecture demonstration as well, and I welcome her back. 45 minutes for your lecture demonstration, please.
Would you let me know when there's 10 minutes? Good morning and a very warm welcome to everybody. Let me start by congratulating this year's Sangeeta Kalanidhi designate, Sri R. K. Sri Kumar. My thanks to the President, Mr. Murali, and the Secretary, V. Sri Ram, for giving me another opportunity to present on a very interesting topic today. I welcome the scholars, the rasikas, the many musicians, and devotees of Muthuswami Dikshitar who are assembled here. 1 minute. My lecture today is rather ambitiously titled Recreating the Library of Muthuswami Dikshitar. Many scholars, many learned scholars and musicians have been working on the works of Muthuswami Dikshitar, and they have contributed so much to our understanding of Dikshitar's compositions. I shall keep them in mind as I proceed. Or perhaps I am better off not thinking about them for the next 45 minutes as I proceed to give my presentation and gather the courage to present my meager understanding of this great composer. Muthuswami Dikshitar was born in 1775 AD in Tiruvarur. So when did his composing life begin? It's almost 1790s, close to the 1800s is when his composing life starts, when he was still a teenager. In the preceding centuries, Thanjavur had become a hotbed of musical activity. It was a veritable factory of ideas, the song forms, ragas, and a lot of innovations were taking place. Tiruvarur, where he was born, and the whole Thanjavur region was a meeting point of Tamil, Vijayanagara, and Maratha cultures. Music was everywhere, from temples to homes, from royal courts to the courtesans' quarters. Venkatamakhi, Muthu Tandavar, Kshetrajna, Narayana Tirtha, King Shahaji, and even Advaitin sannyasins, where such as Sadashiva Brahmendra and Upanishad Brahmendra were composing songs. Important musicological texts by Venkatamakhi, Shahaji, and Tulajaji were written here. So if we wanted to recreate the musical reference library, for example, if Dikshitar had a library, and he did, how would it have looked? What are the things that he would have referred to, and what inspired him? So that is the way I'm going to approach today's topic. And the library that I am referring to is not just a library of books or texts. It also includes everything passed down to him through listening, performing, and simply living within such a great musical culture. And reconstructing his library is never going to be straightforward. I cannot do a complete job of it. And a lot of it is already known, so I have to focus on the few things that make sense to me. Perhaps there is some new information yet waiting to be discovered. So a large part of his library, we can say, has already been reconstructed by the scholars. Today, we will be examining a few specific aspects of his songs and try to identify his sources. Among the Karnataka Trimurtis, Dikshitar stands apart. His works are instantly recognizable, yet hard to categorize. What makes his songs unique and recognizable? To begin with, we all know he chose Sanskrit, a choice that already sets him apart from most of his contemporaries, including his own family, Ramaswamy Dikshitar and his brothers, who they all chose to compose in Telugu. But beyond language, there are some very clear structural features which we will look at today. First, the melodic contour or the outline of his songs. For example, Dikshitar almost never repeats a tune within a composition. And I will talk about it a little more later. So, and if we go by the Sangita Sampradaya Pradarshini, he keeps you on your toes. You never know what kind of a prayoga is going to come up next, even if the raga itself you feel is very familiar to you. So that's something that's quite recognizable about his compositions. The second is his compositional structure. A lot of us, for example, we see that many of his compositions have only two sections, that is a pallavi and then an anupallavi with madhyama kala. That is very quintessentially Dikshitar's format, we can say. Of course, he's composed in other Tri-Charana format also. Now, the other thing I would like to talk about today is the kind of broad themes we observe in his composition, the inspirations. For example, we know that there is a corpus of notuswaras, and they were inspired by English band music that he had heard. Now, with this kind, and then of course Ragamalikas, these kinds of variety of compositions.
I request Sangeeta Kalanidhi Sri T.M. Krishna to please come to the front row.
Sure. So what were his inspirations? Can we, in some sense, recover his library? I will present today's talk in two parts. In the first part, oh, sorry about it. I'm still getting used to this thing. In two parts, in the first part, I will be talking about the broad thematic connections that many scholars have made, the groups of compositions like the Kshetra Kritis and Navagraha Kritis and so on. So I'm still in the wrong slide. So sorry about that. So the first part will essentially deal with the contents of his kritis. The second part will be about the structural and the melodic features. And next, let us look at these broad features. Hold on. So even geniuses, we know that they have to stand on the shoulders of other giants. Can Muthuswami Dikshitar be an exception? In yesterday's lecture by Dr. Naresh Kirti, we saw that he had gathered a lot of inspiration from the poets and the composers that were in the Kaveri Delta in the period, just in the early modern period. So perhaps that's the right place for us to start our investigation of what were the contents of his library. When we speak of Dikshitar's songs, we cluster them into various groups, like the Kshetra groups. So we will continue along that theme. Haripadodaka samakaveri virajana diya snanava ಮಾಡಿ परमवैकुण्ठरङ्गमन्दिर परवासुदेवन नोडद कंगळिद्यातको कावेरी रंगन नोडद. This is a 16th century composition of Sri Padaraya. We see a lot of details about the Kshetra Srirangam in this particular composition. He's mentioning that there is an Aitiham, that there is a Viraja Nadi flowing near the Vaikuntha Dwara in that temple. So yes, we have a long tradition of compositions being sung on specific kshetras. It is quite tempting for us to put Dikshitar in that group of composers starting from the Alvars and Nayanmars, and instead, why don't we look at what's happening closer to his time? We see that closer to his time, the Arunagirinathar has composed his Tirupugal with many metrical innovations, and the many kshetras of Murugan are also mentioned there. And more than that, the Thanjavur region itself was full of ancient and new temples and shrines, each with its own set of stories, rituals, and many local traditions. And more importantly, we know that Dikshitar belongs to the Venkatamaki school. And from what I have seen between SSP and the manuscripts in Thanjavur, Venkatamaki himself has composed Gitas and prabandhas on deities of the region, such as Nataraja and even Kali, goddess Kali of Chidambaram, and then Sharangapani of Kumbhakonam. And many Gitas published in the Sangita Sampradaya Pradarshini are also pointing to Kshetra-specific themes. However, some 7 to 10 decades before Dikshitar, we find a profusion of Kshetra compositions in Marathi language, composed by the Maratha ruler of Thanjavur, King Shahaji. The songs are in praise of deities of major kshetras, like Rameshwaram, Kashi Vedaranyam, Kumbhakonam, Vaidishwaran Kovil, and even the Panchabhuta Linga kshetras, and so on. And Shahaji's compositions, called Salam Darus, have been published. I shall show an example of that quickly, just so you know what kind of a composition it is. So as you can see, the first two lines, they have some lyrics about the same Sri Ranganatha that I started with. Sharanagatarti hara khagavaha sarpashayana Sri Rangure varada kaveri madhyavasa vanamaladhara kasturi ranga. And towards the end, there is a mudra, Tyagesha mitrure, Dina dayalure, etc. Now, this is a very simple composition. It does not have the kind of kshetra details that we see in Dikshitar, obviously. But the point is that such compositions were quite commonplace in the region in that time, a region abounding with many temples. And so Dr. V. Raghavan points out that there is this Sadachaleshwaram song that I think a lot of people are familiar with, that whole story of Sadachaleshwaram. That song refers to the Achaleshwara deity or Achaleshwara shrine in the temple complex of the Tyagesha of Tiruvarur. Now, in that song, there are two miracles mentioned, Udajakrita Namadheyavaham, and then Chaya Rahita Deepa Garbhagraha. And Dr. Raghavan says he found references to these miracles that are mentioned here in the Kamalalaya Mahatmya. So, and Tyagesha Mahatmya, I think Dr. Vidya Jayaraman has pointed out that Tyagesha Mahatmyam is another text that he has drawn a lot of stories and incidents from, basically the Talapuranas, that form the bulk of, or the meat of his compositions. So we can definitely add apart from the Salam Darus and the general influence of this composition of kritis on the kshetras, we can definitely add the Sthala Mahatmyams, and I think a lot of you know about this. I just wanted to start on a good note, connecting King Shahaji and bringing the kind of innovations that are happening in this period into the picture, and that's the reason that I went to it. So first, let's look at another of the compositional groups of Dikshitar. He has composed several, or 4 Ragamalikas, if I'm right. The Veda Ragamalika, the Purna Chandra Bimba has 6 ragas, the Shavatara Ragamalika has 10 ragas, and then the famous Chaturdasha Bhuvana, or Chaturdasha Ragamalika, Sri Vishwanatham Bhajeham. Ragamalika style compositions are essentially very popular in the genre called the court compositions, and we see several of them in the Thanjavur manuscripts, many prabandhas, such as the Raga Kadamba Prabandha. And especially, Venkatamaki himself has composed this Ragamalika style prabandhas, although the SSP does not give us a complete picture, because I believe, based on my research, that only the Mudra Charanam has been published in the SSP. Sri Ranga Prabandha, Uma Tilaka Prabandha, and Sri Vilasa Prabandha that I found in the, they are all Ragamalika type compositions. So there is a tradition, it's a long tradition. And what about Shahaji's time period? Of course, Ramaswami Dikshita, the father of Muthuswami Dikshita himself, is well known for his Ragatala Malikas. But I'm not going to touch upon the similarities between his compositions and Muthuswami Dikshitar's compositions, because I understand that they were actually living in the same time, the greatest in the sense, of course, the father was older, but they might have been composing together, or they were well aware of each other's compositions, and therefore it is not a surprise if Muthuswami Dikshitar's compositions have something to do with his father's. Of course, the major difference is that Muthuswami Dikshitar only composes the Ragamalikas using one tala rather than the Deshi talas and the complex talas that we see in Ramaswami Dikshitar's Raga Tala Malika style. But very interestingly, we find that Shahaji's time period, there is a composition called the Chaturdasha Bhuvana Anuraga Malika Daru. Now, this kind of a label is very confusing. We don't know whether it is Ragamalika or Daru or whatever. Now, I would like to show this example of Shahaji's composition. And also there is a short clip sung by the students at Bangalore University. And so that, again, this clip is a reconstructed or it's basically a notation that I found in Mrs. Madhavi Rajagopalan's notated book. It is not the notation given in the manuscripts or anything, from what I understand. But let us indulge ourselves a little bit. So the composition starts Satata Gauri Vari Sarasadayakari. Now in the published book, the Anupallavi, whatever, that label is missing. However, using the great idea of Mohana, we were able to figure out that Vitata Kalyani Tujhe Viraha Tapate Tapanavari is the Anupallavi. So the Gauri is the raga name. So the way Shahaji's composition is structured is the Pallavi has one raga, Anupallavi has one raga, that is Kalyani. And this is a typical Padam composition. So most of the Tyagesha Padas are actually the Padam style. And what is a Padam style? Pallavi, Anupallavi with 3 charanams. So in the each of the 3 charanams has 4 ragas. So if you look at Charanam 3, there is Samagana Priya. There are, of course, we are reminiscent of the raga choices that Dikshitar makes. Sama. Obviously, when you're singing about Shiva, you would bring in Samagana, and you would bring in Sarangadhara, the deer, holding the deer, and things like that. So in the last Charanam, we see Samagana Priya Tyagesha and Sakala Adi Nata. I think some of the published versions somehow missed this reference to the Nata Raga, which I found out from Mrs. Hema Ramanathan's book, that Nata is a Nata Narayani. So there should be a Nata Raga there, and this makes it a Chaturdasha, that is 14, Ragamalika. So I'll play this. Satata Gauri Vari Sarasadayakari Vitata Kalyani Tujhe Virahapade Tapanavari Satata Gauri Vari Saranga looks like this might have been an inspiration for Sri Vishwanatham Bhajeham. Now we know that Vishwanatham Bhajeham has a beautiful Vilomakrama ending where every half avarta the raga changes and the composer wraps up all the 14 ragas that have been presented, and this appears at the end of each of the 3 sections, and if you indulge me, perhaps I'll try to sing that. Vaidyalinga Bhupala Palanam Guru Ganesha, Sri Pura Nirruti Bhagagadhati Rasthiratara Bhupala Palanam. And now starts the reverse or the Vilomakrama. Guru Gunesha Suranaresha Manisham Kuja Buddhadi Grahagati Vihitam Varada Manalara Vishashinayanam Vanaja Chandra Sannibhavadanam Paramaham Samananda Nartanam Patita Pavana Karanam Agaharanam Smrataram Paramamanolaya Jayam Paradivak Prakashanandamayam Virinchi Vishnu Rudramurtimayam Vishaya Panchakarahitam Abhayam Niratishaya Sukhadani Punataram Nigamasaram Ishwaram Amaram Smaraharam Paramashivam Sarasa Sadaya Hridaya Nilaya Manisham Shri Vishwanatham Bhajeham. This is not found in the Chaturdasha Ragamalika that is attributed to Shahaji. And I am not sure, I was not able to trace any influences. Perhaps the experts here would enlighten me on this. Okay, here is another interesting grouping, that is the Nilotpalamba group, which are grouped. The group appears to be, of course, the Vibhakti is one thing that groups them, but the ragas that appear in this group also have a Gaula suffix, like Narayana Gaula, Kedara Gaula, Kannada Gaula, and so on. Now, this almost appear like this is an unusual grouping because there doesn't seem to be anything that's keeping these ragas together. It almost sounds like some sort of an experiment. Except for the shared Gaula suffix, you might think that there is nothing in common. So, did Dikshitar really fall for such a unusual grouping of ragas? But it appears that there is precedence for this. And again, we have to go back to Shahaji's compositions. He has again composed what is called a Suladi Prabandha Leela Daru. Again, probably the title is a little confusing. But it is sort of modeled after a Suladi, which will have the 7 Suladi talas, 7 passages in the 7 talas. And the ragas are the 7 Gaula ragas. Now, Nilotpalamba has 9 Gaulas because it has some 2 ragas that were added later in Dikshitar's list. That is the Nari Riti Gaula and one more Gaula, Maya Malava Gaula. So, if this is the case, can we say that this Shahaji's composition was an inspiration for Dikshitar? It doesn't stop there. It looks like this tendency to group the Gaula ragas was there in another place. I found a manuscript of a Suladi. It's called a Sapta Gaula Suladi, and the composer is a Ranganayaka Mudra composer. It is a Kannada language Suladi. And this has the 7 Gaulas that were... Now, what is it that the 7 Gaula thing, why is it fascinating? Because I feel it is probably obvious to people who have studied the Chaturdandi Prakashika. The Chaturdandi Prakashika lists 7 Gaula Antya ragas as the ragas that have Nishada, Graha, Amsha, and Nyasa. That's it. That seems to be the only thing that's common, and it might be worth studying to see why there were Nishada Antyagraha ragas, as well as having this, Gaula suffix. So it is not unusual to have creative thinking and creative composers who are playing around with the ragas. And the Ranganayaka Mudra composer, if I'm right, based on Dr. Arti's research, he was very much, even though it's Kannada composition, he was very much based in the Thanjavur region. So it has come from this cauldron, bubbling cauldron of ideas. And I'll give you one more interesting, so before we go to the next slide. Now, there is no reason for the first Vibhakti composition, Nilotpalamba Jayate, to be in Narayana Gaula. It could be the order in which it is given in the Chaturdandi Prakashika, these 7 ragas, is different. And I found an interesting, if you want to call it a coincidence or an inspiration, I would say, that both this composition of Shahaji and the Ranganayaka Mudra composer choose the Narayana Gaula as the first raga. And if the first Vibhakti of Nilotpalamba uses Narayana Gaula, is it possible that they were really inspired by this Shahaji's way of, if not Ranganayaka Mudra composer's way of arranging the ragas? And the reason that the first one is Narayana Gaula is very obvious in my Kannada composition. In the Suladi, it starts Jaya Narayana. So that is a song. It's just talking about the various Jaya Narayana and then Madhava and Dhara Chakra, and it's talking about different things associated with Vishnu, and therefore it makes sense that the composer chose Narayana Gaula. There is no reason for the same raga to be preserved by this Shahaji's Sapta Gaula composition or even in the Nilotpalamba. So I believe this is an example we can use to say that there is a continuity of tradition, and we probably can trace this grouping of ragas, perhaps inspired by Shahaji's composition. Of course, in Shahaji's composition, it's very simple. It's not like they have composed. It's just one composition, whereas in Dikshitar's set, each of them is a separate composition. Let me try to play it, if my hands will work. Shri Tyagesh Shahedra Vinuta Shridhara Narayana Gaula Dhruvata Nitya Jaya Vardhana Aikavito Nija Santosha Pahasatata So it goes on. This second raga is Kannada Gaula. I really would have loved to sing that Suladi as well. The notation is available, but the manuscript is really badly damaged. I'm barely able to make out the names of the ragas. Maybe somebody with, if we sit and work with some experts, we will be able to get that list as well. So that's it about my Gaula suffix ragas. Obviously, in each of these examples, you will see that the proto or the model which is used is much, much simpler. It's very rudimentary. It looks almost like experimental Salam Daru or the Suladis. They are simple compositions. They don't have much complexity. But then Dikshitar takes it and imbues it with his own style, right? His own information, his own way of doing things, and makes it much more complex. And the last example from the Shahaji's time period, I'll quickly walk through it. Mani Pravala is very familiar. The Venkatachalapati, that song, famous one in Karnataka copy. Venkatachalapate ninnu nammiti Vegame nannu rakshiyumayya. So this one, Venkatachalapate Ninnu Nammiti. So it's a mixture of Sanskrit, Telugu, Rakshiyumayya sounds like Tamil, and this theme is carried throughout the Pallavi, Anupallavi, and with Dikshitar's own style or stamp of his style, which says we should have this Madhyama Kala and in the Anupallavi as well as in the Charanam, and that theme continues. Now, the Tribhasha Padam of Shahaji is the equivalent that I found. Now again, this doesn't have a notation. This Tribhasha Padam is composed of Marathi. Instead of Sanskrit, he uses Marathi. And remember, we are talking about 70, 100 years before the time of Dikshita. And yesterday, I think Dr. Naresh Kirti pointed out that Krishna Kavi, or was it Vasudeva Kavi? Vasudeva Kavi had composed some sort of a Manipravala composition. So it looks like this was an extremely interesting area to live in if you were a composer or a singer or perhaps anything to do with the music scene. And this composition, it is Varum Dayato Aji. Varum in Tamil, Dayato in Telugu, and Aji. He maintains this consistently. The first word is Tamil, followed by Telugu, followed by Marathi, sort of reflecting the different, perhaps linguistic layers of Thanjavur region. Tamil forming the base, followed by Telugu rulers who came later, and the Maratha culture that followed, perhaps. So, I mean, I was going to sing the way they have tuned it in Kamas. Definitely the raga was not given in the book, but we can take some creative liberty. So it's a padam, so it's been given a very light tune. Varum dayato aji serum baguga Shiva Shankara Varum. So this goes on. Pavi tendral vachibadhito. Pahekkara kuyil ipudu kujito. So the lyrics are quite interesting. And it's a padam, so it's meant for Abhinaya. Now I would like to come to the major part of my, it looks like I have a little time to go through it. The important question we have is, okay, there was this experimental field of ideas that's there before Dikshitar, and he has grabbed some of these ideas. This is not all the ideas I saw in the one book, Tyagesha Padas. I mean, if we started looking at all the different compositions, we'll probably arrive at many new ideas. Like in the Marathi compositions, there are compositions with which list the names of flowers, the names of fruits, the grahas, and then these kinds of things. Obviously, Dikshitar has not picked every one of them. He's picked some things that are inspiring to him, and we see compositions. And I would now move on to the compositional structure. And what do we mean by that? The metrical and the melodic structure of his compositions, they stand out too, apart from all this thematic stuff. So what do we mean by his compositional structure? Very simplistic diagram. Two sections, Pallavi, Anupallavi with the Madhyama Kala. Of course, Madhyama Kala can also be there in the Pallavi. And the other form is the typical Pallavi, Anupallavi, and a single Charanam. Now, he maintains this almost consistently in his compositions of using only single Charanam, whereas his contemporaries, including his father, or predecessors, I would say, including his father and Tyagaraja and Shama Shastri, they have all used the typical, what I would call the Padam form of having 3 Charanams. Now, he is consistently chosen that this is how I'm going to compose. Now, it looks like he said, I am staying away from this Padam format for whatever reason. I think the idea is that he didn't want to repeat the melody, perhaps. Right? So when you have 3 Charanams, the melody obviously repeats. And perhaps his focus was on the melodic ideas that he's putting through rather than the lyrical ideas. Even in the short format, he is able to brilliantly convey his raga ideas. You have many examples like the Tyagaraja Yoga Vaibhavam. So I will not elaborate on that. If I may be bold, I would like to summarize the melodic structure this way. For example, the sangatis are sparse or perhaps not even non-existent. We don't know. Maybe there's just one line of Pallavi. And the melody does not repeat, either in the form of sangatis, or in the form of these three charanams, or in the form of what we may find in many of Tyagaraja's kritis, or even other people's kritis, where the second half of the charanam is basically a repeat of the tune of the... So not even that is found in his compositions. Of course, Tyagaraja has composed these kinds of songs with a long charanam. And the melody appears deliberately constructed. It is not rushing towards any crescendo. It is going in a rather, I think what is popularly the word that they use is a meandering charanam. The melody sort of winds its way through, and then of course there is a high point perhaps. But this is a lengthy charanam with unhurried melodic phrasing. If you all agree with me on this, I'd like to go to the next slide. So I would like to start with this idea of Gitas of the Chaturdandi music, which is what I have been studying for my PhD, and of course post that. These are songs we also find. Gitas are songs. Trikhanda Gitas they are called, are songs we find even in the Sangita Sampradaya Pradarshini. So is there any similarity between the Gitas and Dikshitar's compositional structure? And I would dare to suggest that there is. So here I've given an example of a Vilambam Dhrutam, but in the SSP, we have only a Gitas with either 2 or 3 sections, and they have the same kind of features that I just listed. But here is another type of Gitam that we do not have any examples, published examples of. And here I would like to draw your attention to what is called the Tani Karana. So I found many songs called Tani Karanams, and Subbarama Dikshita does mention this. I will, as we go forward, I'll show the passage where he's talking about Tani Karanam. So this Tani Karana usually is a Gitam. It can also be a prabandha. Sometimes prabandhas are also called Tani Karanams. Now this is, apart from the word Tani Karanam, we find a word called Shatkhanda in the manuscripts. Now, the earlier Gita's compositions were called Trikhanda. These are called Shatkhanda. In the Trikhanda Gitas, we may have two passages or 3 passages without the melody repeating. Now, in the Tani Karanam, again, the same form of 2 sections. The first section is not called a Pallavi, it's just unnamed. Second section is usually called a Javada. And here, you will find that in the script, it has these words called Vilambam. So the Tani Karana Prabandha or the Tani Karana Gitas are always Vilambakala compositions. Even though they are called Gitas, they are not the kind of simple Gitas with the Yathakshara format that we are familiar with. There seems to be a slightly more complex, there is a little more complexity in terms of the mix of tempos. So the song starts with Shatkhandam Vilambam. So the first passage goes on in Vilambam, then we encounter Dhrutam, and then again it goes back to the Vilambam. There is a short passage of Vilambam followed by the Javada, which is also starting in Vilamba, and it ends in a Madhyama Kala or Dhruta. They call it Dhruta, but actually it is Madhyama Kala because some manuscripts call the same sections as Madhyama Kala as well. So let me go forward with this example. So if I were to summarize what I found with the sections of this Shatkanda, so there are 2, as I said, these are 2 section compositions with the Vilamba beginning and Madhyama Kala in the first section, and again the second section also begins with Vilamba and has a Madhyama Kala in the passage. But to what degree do they resemble Dikshitar's compositions? Well, they are very different. The Prabandha compositions use a Bhandira Bhasha, and they do not have this Monai relationship and things that we are familiar with Dikshitar's compositions. But if we look at Dikshitar as a person who is actively looking at things that are happening around him, he's actually seeking out themes that seem to represent that period of Thanjavur. And then he's using them in different forms in his compositions, is the way that I look at it. So, 5 minutes? I think I'll be done. Thanks. So, in these Tanikarana Prabandhas, how are they similar? If we look at take a step back and look at a higher level, there, we see that there are two sections. First of all, that's a major theme that emerges. And there is no repetition of melodies in the Gita compositions. The Sangatis are none. It's not sparse. There is nothing, basically. And then the Gitas all have a single lengthy charanam equivalent called the Javada. And the melody is quite unpredictable. I don't know if I should say that. The Gitas are kind of unpredictable. It could also be because we don't have the original way they were sung. We just have the notations that have been creatively interpreted by different publishers, I suppose. And this last point, let's not miss this. The lyrics in the Gitas are stotra style. All of them are in the stotra style. So I think I've rearranged the slides. So this is the extract from the Sangita Sampradaya Pradarshini where Dikshitar is talking about the Tanikarana Prabandhas. He says that some Tanikaranas follow the structure of a Prabandha. What is the difference between a Prabandha and the Gita? Prabandha would have Swara sections, Jati sections, and stuff like that, whereas the Gitas are composed entirely of only lyrics, pada. And he talks about the fact that they have alternating Vilamba and Druta passages. Now, this alternating doesn't sound very clear, right? But when we look at an example of the Tanikarana, we see that it's actually a Vilambakala composition with Madhyamakala interspersed, and it is usually in the typical Gita style of composition. And Subrahma Dikshita says, one should practice to sing and play with equal felicity the Alankara, Gita, Prabandha, and Tanikarana in 3 speeds. So that's the grade he gives for these compositions of Gitas. He groups them along with the beginner's lessons of Alankaras and things like that. But that just tells you that these Prabandha type of compositions had become sort of not important because we have the great composers that came after the time of the Prabandhas. And from what I have seen in the Thanjavur library manuscripts, the Prabandhas were very much part of the court culture till Shahaji or even after him. Many Gitas are there. So in Shahaji himself has composed Prabandhas. There are Prabandhas composed on Shahaji, saying something like Sakala Bhayakara Jana Paramananda. That's how it starts. So these kinds of words of praise, either it's a human, like a Shahaji is being praised, and they are very much in the stotra style. If as I said, it's not only about the kings, even though it is court compositions, they are about the deities also. So I wonder, here's an example. So if you wanted to look at the lyrics and what I mean by stotra style, the song starts in Vilambam, Re, okay? And they don't start in Sama, usually they start in the Druta, and then the Re would be in the Druta, and the Parama, the next line would be probably the beginning of the song. Nanda Nandana, Adbhuta Sheela, Nana Vilasa, Nijadasa, Santrana Prana is sung in Vilamba. And then the Druta would be proud in Nirjata Kamsasura Nijad Danudavita Danava Nirgama Santajjana Vanjana Munitrana. So there is a lot of sort of rhythm to the Drutakala. And so here we will not have any doubts about is it Druta because the lyrics themselves suggest that. You look at the second part, second section, there is a Drutam passage that says Shakata Parigattana Dhira Kumbhakarna Dambhadvamsana Samrambhattiyare and all that. So they are interesting in their own way, and you can imagine them being sung in the courts and the people who are listening to these being awed by the complexity of the lyrics. Another example of a Tani Karanam, just to tell you that it's not just one Tani Karanam that I encountered. And there is even a Tani Karanam with the mudra of Venkatamakhi of Govinda Dikshita and Nagamamba in the raga Bauli. And I have, this time I'm not bringing any reconstructions. That is a separate work with probably scholars have to look at. So this I already mentioned, that there is a lot of similarity between the approach. It's not as if, like in yesterday's discussion, we see that it's not as if he just copies it. He's inspired by it, and that's all I'm trying to say. Because it is part of his legacy. He has inherited the Raganga Ragas of Muddu Venkatamaki. His father has composed that famous Hamsadhani prabandha. I am very sure he has looked at the prabandhas and the Gitas himself. In fact, I would say the fact that there are jatis in his compositions, perhaps he himself might have been inspired by these jatis and swaras that he saw in the prabandhas. So let's go to the last. And if you will indulge me, this is not going to take a lot of time. What about the Deshya ragas that Dikshitar has chosen? We know the ragas. I'm not going to tell you what the list is. So I would like to bring us all back to that point that I started with in the beginning. That is, Dikshitar's composing life began in the 1790s, close to 1800s. And if you have a mature phase of his compositions, they probably came in the 1800s. So he becomes sort of a modern day, despite the gravity and despite the burden of the tradition that he inherits. He looks like he's quite a modern composer. He looks like he might have composed in Deshya ragas. Now, are they taboo? Should nobody compose in the Deshya ragas? Obviously not. A lot of people have made this point, that the Deshya ragas were already established in the Thanjavur region. And what I am going to add, just a single point to this. The Marathas, we say sometimes, the Deshya ragas came with the Marathas, and Shahaji is documenting a lot of, Shahaji and Tulaja, they are documenting a lot of Deshya ragas. But what I found was that even in Venkatamaki's time, he has mentioned, of course, Kalyani and Pantavarali that everybody talks about by name, saying that these are Deshya ragas and you must not use it. But then, after describing his 72 Mela scheme, at the end of it, Venkatamaki sort of slyly says, there are these Deshya ragas, and you can use my scheme to sort of insert these Deshya ragas into the appropriate Mela. I'm not very fond of this idea, but then you know that there are ignorant composers who will use these Deshya ragas to compose prabandhas and Gitas. So there we have it. So this trend is not starting with the Marathas. There has always been a connection between the different regions of perhaps the Vijayanagar Empire and beyond. There must have been traveling musicians. They might have encountered different styles of music. And that's the point that I would like you all to think about, the great scholars, the musicians, the people who are studying SSP with such passion. And when you think of Deshya ragas, is it really appropriate to call them, like Subramanian Dikshita does, that they are some sort of seductresses coming from the north? It looks like Thanjavur region, because Shahaji's this Tyagesha Padas has many other ragas that are not mentioned in his text. I assume that they came from the manuscript. I don't think it's an editorial intervention, because for many of the compositions, the raga is not mentioned and the editor has left them alone. But I also found a lot of compositions like that use ragas like Alia Bilawal and so on, Bilawal, Alia Bilawal, which are not even mentioned in the list of Deshya ragas that are given by Shahaji. So, and conclusion, I think I have said enough about this. He has departed drastically from what we call the padam, typical padam of a Kshetragya type composition, both in theme and in form. And Sankirtana also he stayed away from. Everybody talks about there is no emotion in his songs, but then he is preferring to compose in the stotra style that he inherited from Venkatamaki. And he's very modern in the fact that he's actively seeking inspiration from all that has happened in the Thanjavur region before him. Thanjavur region has everything he needs to have this sort of a wide variety of compositions and build upon them. Nothing is just as it is borrowed, and you cannot clearly say that this is borrowed from them, but clearly inspired. And I think Naresh used the word background microwave radiation. So it is all in the culture, and he's inspired by these. And I think that is the context in which I would like to place Dikshitar today, and not look at him in some sort of a vacuum or an isolation where he didn't have any inspiration from anything before him or happening contemporaneously. He's very much affected by things that are happening around him. And of course, we see the influence of Shahaji's time period in the kind of compositions and the experiments that were taking place. And he's a modern, I would like to say a 19th century composer who revives older motifs and modernizes them. And he also symbolizes the spirit of innovation, curiosity, and eclecticism. Before I conclude, I would like to acknowledge the help of Dr. Naresh Kirti for his inputs on several of the points from his lecture yesterday, as well as in person. Now, the audio clips that I had for the Shahaji songs were presented by the students of the Department of Performing Arts, Bangalore University, and I'll quickly read out their name because they did it in such a short notice. Madhuravi, Nayana Sudhindra, Ramya Anil, Ramya Nagendra, Rupa Shri B.A., and Sri Lakshmi. And this is sort of my bibliography. And with that, I conclude my talk today. And thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Srilatha. Thank you very much, members of the Experts Committee. Dr. Subhashini Parthasarathy.
I actually would like to put this question across to the scholars here. Is there not a similarity between the musical form of Padam and Dikshitar Kriti, apart from the fact that there is no dhatu repetition?
I think Dr. V. Raghavan, madam, I'm sure the scholars have a lot to say about that. I saw that Dr. V. Raghavan, in fact, saw that the kritis of Dikshitar resembled Padams. And so, as I said, he has taken inspiration, but then he's modernized it. His composition is nothing like a prabandha or a Gita. They are modern and they are well thought out melodies. And the kind of jarus that and the vilamba that we are talking about, perhaps inspired by Padams, because Padam is not something that he's actively using in the form of the compositions not being used, or the theme either. So perhaps the style of the raga of the Padam is inspiring him, and then he's using that on top of all these other layers of lyrical and musical content. And that's my view, and I know you wanted the scholars to answer.
Sangeeta Kala Acharya, Dr. Rita Rajan.
I think in the oral tradition, some of the Dikshitar Kirtanas, especially from Dhanamal's oral, those compositions which came through Dhanamal's oral tradition, you find influences of Padam in Akshayalinga Omkara, the Manavata. Hemagirinath. அந்த இதில் இந்த அக்ஷயலிங்க இது மானமே பூஷணமோ அந்த இது அந்த க்ஷேத்திரைய பதத்தின் அந்த சங்கதிகள் அப்படியே இங்கே வரும் டிட்டோ அது மாதிரி they have brought the influence of Padam.
Perhaps I should have added that, Ilya. Padam melodic content is superimposed on the form. I think that's a very valid point.
நிறைய அந்த மாதிரி பண்ணியிருக்கா. அங்காரக மாஸ்ரயம் the way it is rendered in Dhanamal's parampara sounds like a Padam. Kotiya Garland is suggestions and Angarakam eppadi paadra Angarakama appadidane Angaraka kala pramaname romba iduvaa irukum. But so many melodic borrowings from the Surati Kshetriya Padam. And so they had that kind of fondness to bring in the Padam influence in Dikshitar compositions. Also the charanam of Sri Matrubhutam. ரொம்ப ஒரு மெலோடிக்காக போகும் இதுவாக போகும் ரொம்ப செரீனாக போகும் பசவ தி தேவ வதீத இந்த மாதிரி பதம் மாதிரி தான் போகும். ஸோ திஸ் இஸ் ஹவ்
ஆமாம் நான் மேபி நான் சொன்னது கொஞ்சம் இட் சவுண்டட் லைக் அவர் சத்துர்பண்டி கம்போசிஷன்ஸ் மாதிரி கம்போஸ் பண்ணியிருக்காரு நான் அப்படி சொல்ல அந்த ஃபார்ம் அலோன் பிகாஸ் தட் வாஸ் த கொஸ்டின் ஐ ஸ்டார்டட் வித் compositional structure, where is that coming from? And that's all it is. Clearly, he's a modern composer exposed to Padam, and maybe that's the best thing he found about Padams. That's the best feature of the Padams. He's not interested in the lyrics or the repetition of tune. Maybe that's supervisor. I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it.
Not interested in the lyric is a very apt observation.
Illa. I'm saying that the lyrics were a vehicle to carry it. அது
No,
வந்து
point well taken. It's just that
sorry.
it tickled my funny bone. That's all.
I'm sort of awkward with these kinds of conversations, but
Actually, Akshay Lingabo, they say many of those great vidwans in those days, Ariyuti Raman Jangar, they learned from Dhanammal. That's what they say.
Sangeeta Kalanidhi, Shri T.M. Krishna has a few points to make.
I'd like to first thank Dr. Srilatha for a lovely presentation. Thank you very much.
thank you so much.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think structurally, stylistically is a very difficult question to interpret. But structurally, I don't think the padam can be associated in structure to a Dikshitar Kirtanam by and large. Because more or less நீங்கள் ஸ்ட்ரக்சர் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு அளவுக்கு ஒரு வர்ணமிட்டு இருக்கிற மாதிரி தான் சொல்லலாம். நிறைய பதம் வந்து ஒரு அமைப்பு ராக அமைப்புன்னு ஒரு வர்ணமிட்டு அமைப்பு தான் லார்ஜ்லி. ஸோ I don't know whether Dhanama school's interpretation can be taken to be, say, to answer your question. I think they are two independent thoughts. Because I think structurally, I'm not convinced you have the kind of flow that you have in a Dikshitar Kirtana melodically, which I think unpredictable is a good word to use, actually. In a padam. Padam, you can predict the flow to a large extent. So I think it is the genius of your school that they connected the two, rather than a structural connection. Exactly, I would agree. Just a couple of thoughts around what you said. I think a couple of interesting things to just think about is that you have a common resource pool, say, for Tyagaraja and Dikshitar. They are in the same region. The resource pool of material is pretty common. But then you have two different conceptualizations happening parallelly. I think that is something very intriguing to think about. So there are also conscious choices being made by the respective person on what from that resource pool they are going to incorporate, what they are not going to incorporate. It's a very conscious decision. So you have, for example, Shahji, who's a common resource for both these people, and both of them taken very different things. Right? So I think that is a fascinating thing for us to think about in terms of influence. It's not just influence, but there is also a thought process. எங்களோட சம்பிரதாயத்திலையோ என்னோட தாட் ப்ராசஸ்லையோ இது ஐ வுட் லைக் டு டேக் திஸ் ஐ டோன்ட் வாண்ட் டு டேக்னு ஒரு டிசிஷனும் இருக்கு. கரெக்ட் ஐ ஃபீல் பிகாஸ் சிலது எடுத்துக்கல. ஸோ ஐ திங்க் தட் இஸ் ஒன் திங் ஃபார் அஸ் டு சீரியஸ்லி திங்க் அபவுட். அண்ட் ஐ திங்க் இன் அ வே டேக்கிங் அவே ஃப்ரம் நரேஷ்'s talk yesterday and your talk today is this whole notion of what is content, lyrical or musical, and the content in terms of, say, usages or phraseologies is taken, but what happens to that content when it is in the hands of a creative genius, right? So I think the transformation, so what is newness is an interesting question for me in that. பழசுதானே புதுசுன்னு சொல்லலாம். இப்போ வந்து இந்த phraseology இருந்திருக்கலாம், இந்த like you said terms could have been used, and but what happens in the process of it becoming new? It's new content now. So and the whole transformation of something from the past to the present, I thought is quite a fascinating thing for us to think about and in terms of what is going on when this happens. There's also an artistic aspect here, I feel that any art object has to have knowns and the unknown. Right. You can't have an art object which is completely unknown, because then there is nothing for me to associate myself with it. So you have to have both lyrical knowns and musical knowns. Correct. If I can split the two, just for argument's sake. So whether it is using phrases or imageries or expressions from the past, or musical phrases, raga phrases from the past, but then you also have bring an element of the unknown. Then the unknown becomes accessible. Exactly. I think that's a very important aspect of Dikshitar that you should not forget. That he brings the two together as quite brilliantly. Oh, there's so much. I have actually a question. Sometimes since I looked at the prabandha, but so I'm going to ask you this question, but don't you feel melodically the prabandha flow is more rigid as a melodic structure than a Dikshitar structure?
Of course.
So I just want to, because now so I'm checking with you. Because if you're going to compare it in terms of melodic flow, I feel they're very dissociated. They're not. Because either one or ghana, if I can use that word in that term, there is a kind of a ghana sense in the prabandha flow compared to this, what I thought.
Or a thought.
Sure.
I have seen prabandhas that are surprisingly, I'm able to sing very clearly. I think in number notations and everything is in written form, and they don't give you adequate information, because sometimes I feel it can't be this bad. We are missing something. Edo paak badla sa and
Could be.
all
It's
of
quite
this
possible.
is like the
It's-
jangri letters.
Yeah, it's
Edo
quite
saak badla
possible.
anmarilla kuda ayirkalam. So I don't want to diss the prabandha genre, because I have found beautiful nate, beautiful Gaula.
And I am not saying it as a negative point
Bauli.
also, by the way. So I did say it.
I think the way it's been transmitted, and we are unable to really
Reconstruct it in some
connect
way.
with
Or-
that
yeah.
tradition.
Just 2 quick points, if you don't mind. One is this other thing that kept running in my mind both today and yesterday is our obsession that Dikshitar went to every temple to compose about that deity. I think both yesterday's and today's lecture also tell us he need not have actually gone.
Exactly.
Because the material was available also from the past. So I'm saying that there is material, both textual, available,
And, yes.
and his own experience. I'm not saying, but should he have traveled to every location?
Dr. Raghavan, in fact, makes this point in his NCPA monograph.
Yes, I
on
remember that, yeah.
Dikshitar, where he says Pashupatishwaram is full of historic inaccuracies, but he says Dikshitar need not have traveled there.
That's a
He
whole
may
point.
have used the lyric, though we don't agree that it's a
I was just going to say that's probably a wrong example,
Yeah,
but anyway,
but
that's
I-
okay. But I'm saying that's also important for us to say that the material is also available for imagination, and one need not have physically gone. Finally, a question that's been in my brain for a long time, both for yesterday and today, is we know this resource is there. We know very little of what they learnt as Abhyasa Gana. Now, we know a little bit, sari, sarigama padanisa tulajal, and namukku theriyum, alankaram theriyum, okay, fine. Adukku mele, ஒரு பாட்டு கிளாஸ்ல தீக்ஷிதர் என்ன கத்துண்டார்? Seems like a simple question, but I think it's actually a very important question for us to think about, right? Because to able to access this resource, there is they built an entire amount of equipment, right? So what did they learn? Other than, so I think that is also something we may not find material, we may find, I don't know, but it'll be, if we can look at some way, I must ask you if there is a way of, if there is manuscript to say what was being taught as music, then maybe we'll be able to reconstruct what did Tyagaraja learn before he came to become a composer. What did Dikshitar learn? And that may give us insight into many things about even teaching processes that we are not thinking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vidushri Amrita Murali had a question.
Namaskaram. It's not a question. I would just like
An
to
observation?
respectfully add a fact, actually. Thank you, Dr. Srilatha, for that wonderful lecture. You had
Dikshitar is
mentioned...
hiding your view.
I'm
He's on the
I am right
extreme
hand.
left.
You played a recording of Satata Gauri. I would just like to add that this was set to tune by my guru with Sangeeta Kalanidhi, designate R.K. Sriram Kumar. He would not claim it or mention it, but this was set for a lecture of Srimati Madhavi Rajagopalan here at the Academy few years back, and we have Nitya Vidya sitting here when he was actually tuning it for her. They learnt it from him for the lecture, and they subsequently presented it also for the 1000th year of Rajaraja Chola. So I would just like to add that he would not claim the tune for the song,
So-
but that was set to tune by him.
On the behalf of the students of Bangalore University, I would like to apologize if we made any mistakes in interpreting. We actually, I didn't have it, and I know based on last year's my experience here, people wanted like music. So I just took the liberty of buying her book, and it did not acknowledge you. I'm very sorry about it. So if there are mistakes, it's entirely mine, and in the hurry process of recording.
So I did not mention it for that, but I just thought it should go on record
Oh, yes,
that
absolutely.
he has
please.
set
So
it to tune.
I'm glad to
That's
hear
all.
that
Thank
there
you.
is some connection between what I said today and this year's hero.
Last point, Vidushri Bharati Ramasubban, after which the mic will come to the Sangeeta Kalanidhi.
Namaskaram, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Srilatha. I have a question to ask Sangeeta Kalanidhi, T.M. Krishnarna. If correct me
If it's
if
a question
I'm...
to him, then please keep it offline,
No,
because
because
then it
he-
becomes a... No.
No, because
I'd
it
like
was
it
to
be
do...
addressed to the presenters, and we'll
No, because
draw
it
the
is to
line
do
there.
with kshetras,
Then
which is...
ask her, because
No, but
that's
it was
the...
a
No, then it
counter.
becomes an endless
Okay, fine.
discussion,
All
and then
right.
it goes
Thank
on
you.
for
Thank
a
you
long
very
time.
much.
I may,
Thank
can
you.
I point to him? If she asks me?
Not at this point, because keeping time in mind as
No,
well.
no, no, I'm just
Thank
joking
you.
about it.
Thank you, thank you. I now pass on the mic to Sangeeta Kalanidhi elect Vidwan Shri R K Sriram Kumar.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Srilatha.
Thank you.
This is exactly what we should understand, because both Naresh said LecDem yesterday and Srilatha said LecDem today have things in common. The inspiration that all these composers have had, for example, if you take Tyagaraja's inspirations, there's a long list, and Tyagaraja himself records certain names like Purandaradasa, Ramadasa, then the Varkari saints, and Narayana Tirtha, Tulasidasa, and all of them. And with Dikshitar, as Krishna rightly said, we don't know what kind of music they learned, but it's very obvious that he has been greatly inspired by the Gitas. And I have a small question here. The Nilotpalamba, the seven Sapta Gaula Suladi, was very interesting. But my small apprehension here is, if this was really a popular composition, or it has come down, or it's been well recorded, and it really inspired the Nilotpalamba series, how is that Subramanian Dikshitar has really missed out on all these?
I'm not...
It's not like Subramanian Dikshitar, maybe...
Am I allowed to answer?
Yeah, please.
And the Ranganayaka Mudra Prabandha Suladis, none of them are found in SSP. It was in fact Dr. Arti's
Not the
research.
Ranganayaka, not the Suladis. Now, the
Shahaji's
Nilotpalamba series, of those compositions.
Adi SSP la illena.
No. It's, you said, I'm talking about the Nilotpalamba series. The
Gaula.
Gaula series, எந்த கீர்த்தனமும் பிரதர்ஷனில் இல்லை, except for Sri Nilotpalana. Even in those that Gaula series, you have two kritis in Riti Gaula. அது வேற ஒரு confusion இருக்கு. ஒன்னு நாரி Riti Gaula, ஒன்னு ordinary or Purusha Riti Gaula. I don't know what. So,
The old man Riti Gaula.
அதான். So அங்க ஒரு கன்ஃபியூஷன் இல்ல, இந்த ரீதி கவுளை எப்படி பாடணும், அந்த ரீதி, பிகாஸ் ரீதி கவுளை தீக்ஷித ஸ்கூல்ல ஒரே மாதிரி தான் பாட முடியும், பிகாஸ் இட்ஸ் ராகாங்க ராகா, தேர் இஸ் நோ क्वेश्चन ஆஃப் தி சதுஸ்ருதி தேவதா as well. So அது கொஞ்சம் இன்ட்ரிகிங்கா இருக்கு, எப்படி இவ்ளோ இம்பார்ட்டண்டா இருக்கிற ஒரு ஃபேசட் இருக்குனாக்கா எப்படி சுப்ரமணிய தீக்ஷிதர் அவ்ளோ அப்படி மிஸ் பண்ணிப்பார்.
I don't know whether he looked at Shahaji's compositions or... See, that's the point I'm trying to make. Our compose panara, Inota compose panara, the connection seems to be there based on that Narayana Gaula and first Vibhakti. And of course, the fact that so many other Shahaji's compositions are appear to be familiar to Dikshitar. அப்போ இது ஒருவேளை manuscript formல பார்த்திருக்கலாம், யாரனா பாடி கேட்டிருக்கலாம்.
அது சரி,
அந்த மாதிரி சொல்றேன்.
அது தெரியுது, பட் இது எப்படி மிஸ் ஆச்சுன்னு
எனக்கு தெரியல. I mean, I am not going behind the genuineness of compositions.
The other thing is, Dikshitar multiple charanams பண்ணலை. Yes, correct தான். In fact, there is one பட்டமாட்ட வந்து ஒருத்தர் வந்து சொன்னார், பாருங்க பட்டமா, தீக்ஷிதரே வந்து அவரோட காம்போசிஷன்ல அவரே சொல்லியிருக்கார், நான் ஒரு சரணம் தான் பண்ணியிருக்கேன், மத்வா ததேக சரணம் அப்படின்னு. இது பட்டமா, அது ரொம்ப, அது மத்வா ததேக சரணம், அது நத்வா ஸ்ரீ குரு சரணம், மானச குரு குஹால நத்வா ஸ்ரீ குரு சரணம் கிருத்வா நாமஸ்மரணம் ஜித்வா மோகாவரணம் மத்வா ததேக சரணம். அது வந்து தமிழ் மத்வா ததேக சரணம், ஏக சரணம். தீக்ஷிதர் ஒரே சரணம் தான் பண்ணு. பாவம் பட்டமா வந்து, சோ ஏன் சொல்ல வரேன்,
50 இயர்ஸ்ல சம்ஸ்கிருத் கம்ப்ளீட்டா போயிடுதுனா கண்டிப்பா அதுவும் இருக்கும்.
பட் அதுல ஒரு சின்ன எக்ஸெப்ஷன் இருக்கும்னு எனக்கு தோன்றது, பிகாஸ் மாயே துவம்யாஹில அது வந்து மல்டிபிள் சரணம்ஸ் மாதிரி தான் நோட்டேட் பண்ணிருக்காரு சுப்ரமணிய தீக்ஷிதர். 1 2 போட்டிருக்காரு அந்த ஆஃப்டர் தி ஹே அனுபல்லவிக்கு அப்புறம். அண்ட் another thing, இந்த different melodies, yes, it's not the same melody, but multiple charanamsக்கு of course, different melodies.
So he was averse to the idea of repeating melodies in Totariya.
That's very obvious. That's where you're based. But on the coming back to the melody section, Mami Shanamari, ஆமாம் அது விபக்தி தான் யூஸ் பண்ணியிருக்கார் பட் மல்டிபிள் சரணம்ஸுக்கு சொல்கிறேன் ஆமாம் இல்லை பல்லவியில் பல்லவி வெரி இன்ட்ரெஸ்டிங். இப்போ ஸ்ரீமீனாட்சி கௌரியிலேயே பல்லவியிலேயே ஒரு சிட்டு ஸ்வரம், ஒரு முக்தாயி ஸ்வரம்னு ஒன்று கொடுத்துருக்கார். அப்புறம் அனுபல்லவி அதுதான் ரைட். யா சங்கராச்சாரியம் அந்த மாதிரி. And the other thing is, talking about the Varnamit, obviously Dikshitar did not follow Varnamit typical thing, but there are some semblances of it because, for example, Akshalinga Vibho is Manasakur. Given a Mishra Chapatala and a Shankarabharana, you have this kind of, கல்யாணி அண்ட் மிஸ்ர சாப்பத்தாழ நம்பி கேட்டவரில்லவோ அந்த ஒரு கதைய கதைய மாதவம், திஸ் இஸ் ஒன் வர்ணமிட். ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி தெர் ஆர் செம்பிளன்சஸ். இப்போ ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் புராண புருஷம் புராந்தகம் பராகுசேயக வரதயகினி அங்கே ராஜ ராஜேஷ. ஸோ இதெல்லாம் அந்த வர்ணமெட்டோட ஒரு செம்பிளன்சஸ் இருக்கு. Definitely he does not repeat. நீ ரொம்ப அழகாக சொன்ன, தி மெலடி இஸ் கம்ப்ளீட்லி அன்பிரடிக்டபிள். இப்படி தான் போகும், நம்ம எதிர்பார்க்கவே முடியாது. But in spite of all that, there are certain small little markers where he also indicates that he also probably respects the Varnamit, if I may say that. And இப்போ சங்கராபரணத்திலே ததரன அந்த ஃப்ரேஸ் வந்து பதரீவன அஜன்மமு சமகான அந்த அதுக்கு. பட் of course the charanam is completely unpredictable. நம்ம இதுக்கப்புறம் இப்படி தான் வரும், இப்போ தாரஸ்தாயி போகும் அப்படிலாம் சொல்லவே முடியாது. ஸோ அது அண்ட் அகெயின் இமோஷன்லெஸ். எஸ் டெஃபினெட்லி அவர் ரொம்ப தீக்ஷிதர் ரொம்ப ஸ்டாய்க்காக இருந்திருக்கார். அன்லைக் ஹிஸ் கண்டெம்பரரிஸ் வேர் தே ஹவ் poured their emotion into their compositions and they have expressed a lot of myriad emotions. Dikshitar does not do it, but I think the music speaks for all the emotion in his compositions, I guess. And thank you very much for this very, very enlightening lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow we meet again at 8 a.m. when our lecture demonstrations tomorrow are Vidwan K. Bharat Sundar, Dikshitar and the North, tracing Hindustani threads in a Carnatic fabric. The second lecture demonstration, Dr. Rama Kausalya with Vidushi Madhuvanti Badri, the Vara Kritis of Muthuswami Dikshitar. I look forward to seeing you all here tomorrow. Thank you.